To me, the values of diversity, equality, inclusion are literally, and that's not kidding, the core strengths of America. That's why I'm proud to have the most diverse administration in history. It taps into the full talents of our country. It starts at the top with the vice president.
Joe Biden is on the wrong side of everything right now, especially the polls, as he tries to cling on to the presidency. And so he's decided, or at least the people who make decisions for him and his campaign have decided, that he's really got to shore up the black vote. He's got to get out there and make sure that black voters come out in droves for him like they did 4 years ago. So, of course, he decided to go to a black place with black people and talk about black things because, well, that's what racist Democrats do when they're trying to take advantage and take for granted the black vote. So he goes to Philadelphia and they set up a photo op. I'm sure you've seen these pictures of what the gymnasium really looked like. There were probably about 100 people there, but they put them all behind him holding signs. In front of him were the media cameras and about 20 people. And he's at a podium addressing the media cameras and 20 people as if he's addressing this giant room full of people. But it wasn't. And then he reveals exactly what went into the decision-making process to choose Kamala Harris as the vice president.
To me, the values of diversity, equality, inclusion are literally, and that's not kidding, the core strengths of America. That's why I'm proud to have the most diverse administration in history. It taps into the full talents of our country. It starts at the top with the vice president.
Oh boy, where to start with this one? First of all, I think it would be absolutely rude, offensive, and insulting to refer to Kamala Harris as a DEI hire, as a diversity hire, right? That would be rude, except for the fact that he just did it. So I guess if the guy who hired her is acknowledging that she was a DEI hire, it's okay for us to do it too. I can't wait for Joy Reid to get a hold of this one. Let's break this down moment by moment. It's only 19 seconds long, but I got plenty to say about it, as usual.
To me, the values of diversity, equality, inclusion.
So you saw what he did there, right? He misread the teleprompter, which is like, the size of a Jumbotron at a football stadium. I assure you, it did not say diversity, equality, and inclusion, because we're all in favor of equality. Who doesn't want equality? Of course, equality. No. It's equity, Joe. It's equity. You misread the word. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. He literally doesn't know what he's saying. If somebody sat him down and explained the difference between equality and equity to him, he'd be like, oh, well, we're not doing that equity thing. That's un-American. That's not fair. No, Joe, we're promoting the equity thing. Equality is in the past. Now it's equity. What? That's wrong. We can't do that. Equity, that sounds like socialism. That's Marxism. Yes, that's right, Joe. That's right. We're Marxists now. It's okay. Just read the teleprompter.
Equality, inclusion are literally, and that's not kidding, the core strengths of America.
Literally not kidding, the core strengths of America. Now, I've told you this before. Every time he says not kidding, it means he either doesn't know what he's talking about or he's lying. Sometimes he says it as just a mental tick to catch his breath because the teleprompter is moving too fast for him. After all, he's Joy Behar's age. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are literally, I'm not kidding, the core strengths of America. Now, I guess you could make that case, but if you're thinking about the core strengths of America, you would go back to the founding of our nation. And I hate to tell him this, but diversity back then meant that you'd let a couple of Catholics into the room. I love our country, but not because it's diverse. Diversity is a great thing, but it's not one of the core fundamental strengths of our nation at its founding, and certainly not throughout its history. We weren't very diverse. That's okay, though, because back then we were bonded around certain things that were way more important than the triviality of your DNA or your skin color. We bonded around ideas, thoughts, beliefs, principles, values. First and foremost, that every one of us was born free by God. Now, because of slavery, we didn't get it quite right. It took years to really hold true to those values. But diversity, equity, and inclusion were not the fundamental core principles and foundational ideas that made this country great. And they still aren't. They're great side benefits of the principles of freedom, the principles of liberty, the principles that God granted us these rights, not a government. And the government should serve the people, not the other way around. That's what our nation was founded on. And because anyone of every color or every religion or any ethnicity can embrace those four core fundamental principles, then that's when the diversity happened in our country, because people from all around the world recognized that we had something different going on here, that we didn't identify ourselves based on where we happened to be born or who we happened to be born to or the color of our skin or our accent or our language or even our bank account. We valued each other based on the God-given rights that we were created with. So then suddenly people flock from all around the world and say, yeah, get me some of that. Then suddenly you see diversity of skin color and faith and ethnicity, but that's not the core fundamental building block of our country as he just maintained. Wouldn't it be great to see a president stand in front of the American people and ascribe freedom and liberty and self-determination and free market principles as, I'm sorry, what did he say again?
And that's not kidding. The core strengths of America.
Wouldn't it be great to have him say that those were the core strengths of America? Law and order, equal justice under the law, one man, one vote. These are the principles that are the core foundational strengths of our nation. All right. But no, to Joe Biden, suddenly, if this was really, again, I just want to get the words right.
It's not kidding. The core strengths of America.
If diversity, equity, and inclusion are the core strengths of America, then they would have been the core strengths of America 30 years ago or 50 years ago. Would Senator Joe Biden in 1972 have said that diversity, equity, and inclusion are the core strengths of America? You know, the Joe Biden who was opposing busing because he didn't want his kids to go to a racial jungle at their school? Do you think well, how about 30 years ago when Senator Joe Biden was lying his way through a presidential campaign and pretending that he was giving speeches that were really written by people over in England? Do you think he would have said that? I mean, if it's really a core foundational principle of our nation, then it's not something that just came up with, 6 years ago. But in fact, DEI is something that they came up with 6 years ago. But now, my friends, it's a core fundamental building block of our nation.
That's why I'm proud to have the most diverse administration in history. It taps into the full talents of our country. It starts at the top with the vice president.
Who's going to tell him that the vice president is not actually at the top? Is someone going to actually break the news to Joe Biden that technically he's the one at the top? Why does he keep doing this? But there you go. I am proud that I picked Kamala Harris because of DEI and how important it is to me all of a sudden. I'm proud that I picked Kamala Harris. So that's why he picked her. I mean, we've always known that, but now he's admitted it. And so now there's nothing wrong with us referring to Kamala Harris as exactly what she is, a diversity hire. She is a DEI hire. Joe Biden just proudly proclaimed it. Also in front of this black audience in a black city talking about black things because he wants the black vote because, he's racist. He made this very important boast.
On Memorial Day, I proudly stood with a black man.
Well, it's about time. I mean, he's been around for over 80 years. And it took him until this Memorial Day to stand with a black man. I think he's talking about Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. I don't know. I mean, Lloyd Austin has served our country as a 4-star general. I think he's got some good things in his track record before he became Secretary of Defense. A couple of things are sketchy, but I will say this about him. He's a West Point grad. He served our nation for decades. And as a 4-star general, I think that he would probably not want his entire existence and career of service in our military to be boiled down to he's a black man. But in his boss's eyes and the commander-in-chief's eyes, that's pretty much it. Who's that guy over there? He's a black man.
On Memorial Day, I proudly stood with a black man.
I'm glad he was proud of it. I mean, you got to give him that. At least he's proud of standing with a black man. I mean, there was a time when he wouldn't have been so proud. What's really at stake here, though, is Joe Biden trying to get the, as we called it, as Democrats often call it, the black vote. And so probably rather than just pandering to them and putting on this photo op that is all camera tricks instead of the reality of an empty gymnasium, instead of bragging about DEI, which he doesn't actually understand because he said equality and the fact that Kamala Harris was a diversity hire, instead of bragging about the fact that on Memorial Day he lowered himself to stand next to a black man, maybe he should actually look at what voters are concerned about. Maybe he should actually study the polls and figure out exactly what the problem is right now on why he's losing support. CNN did the hard work for him on that one.
Bring major change to the U.S. Look at this. 65% of voters under the age of 30 say they want a candidate to bring major change to the U.S. And in that same poll, you know which candidate they thought would bring major change to the country? They thought Donald Trump would. So all of a sudden you match up those two questions and you get a pretty clear understanding of why younger voters seem to be becoming more Republican versus 4 years ago.
You got to read this.
And by the way, that's also for younger voters of color as well. He's hemorrhaging those votes. Now, MSNBC recognizes how dangerous this is for their chances of having Joe Biden get reelected. So to lecture those young black voters and to tell them what they should do, they trotted out this guy who appears to be, other than Joe Biden, the whitest man in America. There's nothing better than the whitest man in America on MSNBC lecturing black voters about what's best for them.
It is not the concern about African-American voters, young voters, and Hispanic voters, like these core elements of the Democratic coalition. The concern is not that anybody really thinks they're going to go flock off to Donald Trump. The concern is that they stay home, that in a very, very close election in all of those battleground states, you know, if a large chunk of any of those parts of the coalition decide to just say, screw it, I'm not going to vote, that's a problem for the Biden campaign. The upside there, to your point, Joe, is you're not trying to persuade them in a lot of cases to come back to Joe Biden. You're just trying to persuade them to do what they did in 2020 and to realize the stakes and what a devastating outcome it would be for their interests, for the interests of young voters, the pocketbook interests. They are focused more on the economy than they are on Gaza. We see that in the polling for African American and Latino voters that a Trump presidency, Trump reelection would be terrible for them. So just please do what you did from the Biden campaign's point of view. Just do what you did back in 2020. You're right. That is the easier sell than trying to get older white voters who have drifted away from the Democratic coalition over the last 20 years to come back home. Those guys are sticking with Biden, and that's a big part of why they can be optimistic in those three Midwestern states.
So, in other words, all you black voters, you young voters, come back and do what's good for you. We know what's best. This whole thing about staying home or flirting with voting for Donald Trump, you morons, you're operating against your own best interests. Look at how great things are for you right now. Look at what voting for Democrats in 2020 did for you. And if you can't see it, you're the problem, you morons. So listen to Boss Whitey over here and come back and vote for who we tell you to vote for. Is this going to work? That's all they got? That's actually all they got. I said it yesterday. Donald Trump actually has a golden opportunity right now to actually present himself as sort of the optimistic, forward-thinking visionary in this campaign. He can actually offer voters something to vote for, not something to be terrified about and vote against. That's all Democrats have. And identity politics. You know, the other guys are racists. I'm going to hire more black people to work in my White House, and certainly that's going to affect your life, so vote for me. How insulting is that message? Hey, I made a black woman vice president. What more do you want? Oh, I know you can't afford your car payments or milk or eggs or gas, and your kids are getting a lousy education. But look, I brought in this one black woman here. Why aren't you grateful? The whole DEI thing and the whole Heidelman there on MSNBC saying, do what's good for you. Don't operate against your own best interest. All that rhetoric works when your economy isn't in the toilet. All that rhetoric works when you're not letting 10 million people illegally cross into the country and screw up the basic fundamental social structures of major American cities where the majority of those black voters actually live. They're seeing illegal immigrants that Biden has led into the country get benefits that they've never gotten from Democrats, ever. And they're supposed to shut their mouth and just dutifully vote a certain way because white boy on MSNBC tells them to? Sorry, Boss Whitey. I should stick with my original description. Yeah, that's all they got. Here comes Trump, man. Keep doing rallies in the Bronx and saying, we got a brighter future ahead of us. Give me a shot. Suddenly he's mourning in America. And the Democrats, Joe Biden, the angry cranks on MSNBC and CNN, they're opening the doors wide open for him to take that lane. I hope he's smart enough to take it.